Good evening. My name is Bakari Garvey, and welcome to Southern University Law Center and Southern University A&M College's Student Government Association hosts the Louisiana Senator Candidates Forum. I would like to start off briefly for a moment of silence for the victims that were in the catastrophe of Hurricane Zeta. Thank you. As you know, some of our candidates were affected in the storm and you will not see them today. However, we'll still have a good and productive forum. Some of the candidates here will discuss some hot topics so that it will be better to inform you on matters as you still cast your vote on November 3rd. I would like to thank my Chancellor, Chancellor John Pierre, as well as the Chancellor and President Belton of the Southern University Systems for allowing us to be great astute leaders and hosting this candidate forum. This will be a respectful forum that will be nothing but a form of education for our students here in the community as well as statewide. I'll go ahead and pass the moderation down to the President of Southern University, Chandler Verdreen.
So good evening, everyone. I am Chandler Verdreen, a senior majoring in criminal justice from Ville Platte, Louisiana, and I serve as the 2020-2021 Student Government Association President here at the Southern University and Agricultural and Mechanical College and the student board member to the Louisiana Board of Regents. So to provide guidance in regarding to the overall process on the candidates, here are the rules and the procedures for this evening. Please refrain from turning the microphones on when it is not your turn. Each candidate will have about 90 seconds to reply per question. A red card will be shown on the screen like this to notify the candidate of 10 seconds left. At the end of the allotted time, a verbal command time will notify the candidate to stop. The microphone will be muted at that time, and please do not unmute yourself. A 30-second rebuttal will be allowed if a candidate refers to another candidate within his or her reply, and the same time notification will be enforced. And right now, I will turn it over to Ms. Domonique McCraney, who is the Southern University Law Center Woman in Law President.
Good evening, everyone. Candidates will now have a minute to present their opening statement. Please wait until you're called upon. Mr. Beryl Billiot.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to address the student body as well as the citizenry out there who's interested in this race. My name is Beryl Billiot. I'm a lifetime Louisiana resident. I'm a Christian. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, a small business owner, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and I'm concerned about the future of all of our well-being. In December of 1985, I took an oath. I was still a senior in high school as I committed to serve in the United States Marine Corps. And in that oath, I promised to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I served my country honorably then, and I look forward to serving my country again in this new capacity. And so as we move into this chapter of our lives, those of us who are here tonight, find that it is necessary to change the leadership because there's something that we don't like about it. It's more important now than any other time in our lives to be involved in these political races, because only through participation can we truly affect the change. And so I personally do not believe that I should expect change without being part of the change. And so that's my reason for running in this United States Senate race, is because we need new leadership. Our priorities are upside down and backwards, and it's time for new leadership. And we must answer the call. And I applaud each and every one of you for being involved in this, because even if we don't agree, we all do agree that our country is worth fighting for. And so good luck to each and every one of you, and may God be with you. And, things that we learned tonight, we can learn from each other. And those of us that move on can take the ideas that we place on this forum tonight and use them for good for all. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Xan John.
Hey, how are y'all? My name is Xan John. I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana. I'm here to completely shatter this new paradigm, this rush job of COVID-19 and all of its unnecessary protocol that's been forced on us by the liberal media and the government that is desperate for this power grab. It takes precedent over any other issue that anyone could be base their platform on, because this is a program for total control. And this has actually been in the works for quite some time. And we are all being punished because Donald Trump is president, and they don't want him to win again, as in the left doesn't want him to win again. So what I'm trying to do is to help everyone metabolize properly what is being thrown upon us, and the fact that cash is going away, menus are going away, and things like that are never going to come back unless we stand up. So I could elaborate on that forever, but I'll leave it at that as an opening statement. Here to shatter the paradigm of this whole COVID hoax and raise awareness about what's really going on and thinking past the first dimension. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Mr. M.V. Mendoza.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Vinny Mendoza. I'm from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and I'm concerned about the health, economic, environmental, and social crisis that we are facing at this time. And that is one of the reasons why I decided to run. I'm a retired Air Force veteran. I was the Assistant to Inspector General of the Air Force, and also was the Chief of Services. And I was able to see firsthand how the Department of Defense wastes a lot of funding in unnecessary war equipment. So I created a 5-point action plan that can help solve some of the problems that we're facing, and will also provide for $3.5 trillion in revenue, which can help solve the $1 trillion annual deficit that we currently have, and reduce the total debt of $24 trillion. And I plan to do that by doing a tax reform, tax
Our next candidate is Attorney James Myers Montgomery.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamar Myers Montgomery. I'm from Shreveport. I'm a former juvenile defense attorney, and I worked with kids. And one of the reasons why I jumped in this race was because prior to becoming an attorney, I was a political science professor at Southern University Shreveport. And we've been seeing all over America is voter apathy. And recently, within the last couple of weeks, we've seen that early voting records have been demolished. But prior to that, it was a political apathy and a lack of political involvement, especially amongst our young people. Now, the thing is that I saw that same political apathy, not only with our college students, but also with my clients. And I recognized that there was a common problem. And that problem was that we have not given the political education and have not showed people how their government can actually help them. And because they don't see their government helping them, they don't see their government involved, They are disenfranchised and not involved. So it's important that they see people that look like them, that have their best interests, that are fighting for them, that they know are fighting for them within their government. Because now if you do not believe in your government and you don't think that your government is going to help you, you're not going to be involved. So the way that we change that is by Hello? Someone muted me during that time.
Our next,
Just a quick reminder, each candidate, you have 1 minute to present your opening statement. And once you reach that 10-second mark left, I will put this red color up on the screen so that way you can know when your time is coming up.
our next candidate is Mayor Adrian Perkins.
Hello, everybody. I want to first thank Southern University Law Center for hosting us tonight. Really quick, my name is Adrian Perkins. It has my picture as Antoine Pierce beside it. Can we correct it and I start over? I don't want anybody in the audience to get confused.
Yeah.
If my picture is showing, I can just start. I mean, if the video is showing, I can just start. I just didn't want to confuse anybody. Okay, just starting over. First off, I want to thank Southern University Law Center for hosting this debate tonight, this forum tonight, and having us here. I'm the mayor of Shreveport, Mayor Adrian Perkins. I was born and raised in Shreveport by a single mother who raised me and my 2 older brothers. I graduated from Captain Shreve High School. I attended West Point, where I was class president. Graduated from West Point, served in the military for 8 years, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and transitioned from the military, went to Harvard Law School, was student body president there, came back home and ran for mayor. I've been mayor now for 2 years. I am running for the United States Senate because of the failed response of Washington, D.C. to COVID-19 in my community. I know that if they aren't there for us right now during a time of crisis, that we do not have leaders in D.C. that's going to fight for us. So I'm running to make sure that we have leadership, strong leadership in Washington, D.C. that's going to support the members of our community that make it strong.
Our next candidate is Mr. Antoine Pierce.
Hi, I'm Antoine Pierce, and I am a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a twice graduate of Louisiana State University. My second degree was in the Master of Public Administration with a concentration in public policy. We're running this grassroots campaign, and we started years ago traveling across the state, talking to voters and meeting them where they are to discuss the issues that matter to them. Since then, we developed a platform that I believe speaks to all voters, that covers the very real and present issue of COVID-19. 225,000 people have died, and we need to do something about it. But we're also going to cover universal health care, raising the minimum wage, criminal justice reform and police reform, environmental injustice, and ending the corporate influence on our politics. These are all issues that we've heard from the hundreds of thousands of people that we've talked to over this time period over the years, and we're ready to face those issues head on in the U.S. Senate. I think I have the skills and the education. I have the know-how to actually address those issues adequately. So I'm here today to talk about those things.
Our next candidate is Mr. Peter Winstrup.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Garvey and Mr. Vadrine for hosting. Thank you, Ms. McCraney and Ms. Williams for being our moderators. Thank you to the Southern University Law Center. I come here as a husband, a father, a lifelong school teacher, and a coach. I'm incredibly proud of my evenings spent tutoring future Southern men and Southern women, as well as my weekends coaching and mentoring. I'm here because education and educational inequities are at the heart of nearly every problem facing Louisiana today, from starting small businesses to attracting large ones, to our incredible income discrepancies, to our health, and to our neighborhoods. But this campaign is about more than education. Early in my career, I learned the difference from older teachers between serving and empowering. Serving means you give students rules and information. Empowering means you allow students to support their identities, to work together, to find challenges, to find solutions. We need elected officials who work like that.
My co-mediator for tonight is Kasey Williams. Kasey?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kasey Williams, and I serve as the Student Government Association Vice President at Southern University, Baton Rouge, and I will ask the first question of the night. Louisiana is currently ranked 48 for education within the United States. If elected, what would you propose to improve public education within Louisiana? Mr. John.
Hey, yes, thank you so much for calling on me first. So that is something I'm not the best equipped for, so I guess appropriate more funds. I know the Common Core is lacking. That's my answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza.
Having been a former educator myself, I believe that, of course, the school system needs more funding, and I've talked to a lot of teachers. They're concerned about the testing process that the government requires them, but I've been telling them that it's important to evaluate the students and the teachers. So to me, we need to make an effort so the teachers understand that they're gonna receive higher salaries when they score higher with the students. But going back to the funding part, in the process of creating the Green New Deal agrarian reform, which provided about $1 trillion in funding, so that education can be paid from that. And I would want to recommend to do half day of academics and half day of training in whether it's home education, mechanics. In Japan, children receive a vocational training from elementary school to high school. By the time they get to high school, they have good paying jobs.
Attorney Montgomery.
Thank you. Yes, that's absolutely correct that Louisiana is 48th in education, and it starts off with starting as early as possible by providing for universal pre-K. Because if we already get our children in the mindset and mind frame of learning and academic achievement at a very early age, it becomes much easier as they get older to further educate them and to inculcate into them the importance of education. So by providing more resources for universal pre-K, by establishing universal pre-K and establishing more resources for our teachers and for our schools, we're going to have better outcomes. Also, we need to make sure that our education is also being tied to the new jobs and new industries that are going to be coming up. So if our education is not helping our children, if our education is not preparing our children for the workforce of tomorrow, what good is that education? Our children need to gain also more entrepreneurship skills as well. That needs to be put in within our education system. So first, by starting off with universal pre-K Two, more funding and resources for not school administrations, but actually the teachers, the people who are actually in there with the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Perkins.
Yes, thank you. With education, education truly is an investment into our future. And we have to stop letting zip code determine the educational outcome for too many of our children. And I say that because I'm from one of the lowest income communities in Shreveport. I was raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. And I can tell you, I think educating our children and making sure that our education system in Louisiana is stronger actually starts with raising the minimum wage. I can just tell you from personal experience, if my mom made a livable wage growing up, she wouldn't have had to work 2 jobs, and she could have spent more time at the house with me and working with me on my education. It goes beyond just raising the minimum wage, which strengthens households. It goes to investing in childcare as well, and making sure that our children are growing up with sufficient childcare that's also creating a learning and a flourishing environment for them. Then after we invest in childcare to make it more affordable and more accessible for our families that are typically the low income families are disproportionately impacted, we then have to invest in early childhood education, whether it's universal pre-K, universal kindergarten, you name it. We have to invest early. It's a ton of data out there that shows when you invest early in your children is one of the most fruitful things that you can do with dollars. So we have to invest, and we have to invest early. And I say all that, but I have to address the incumbent's point of view. The incumbent is supporting a Secretary of Education that does not believe in our public education system and has taken $70,000 from the DeVos family. So that just shows you.
Mr. Winstrup.
Thank you. There were some really great points brought up, especially about early education. What Mr. Perkins mentioned about increasing the minimum wage, I think is really important to allow parents to play a bigger role in the role that they want to play in our children's education. But my plan would focus on bringing resources to the communities that need them the most. And the way we would do that is we would move teacher salaries, which are the simplest piece of our education budget, to the federal level. States are never going to fund it the way it needs to be funded. And we would pay teacher salaries between $60,000 and up to $100,000, depending on the child poverty rate in the area. In Opelousas, the child poverty rate is over 40%. Teachers there would earn up to $108,000 a year. This change would allow leaders from the community to go back to the communities they come from and teach. Too often, because of the racial wealth gap and because of student debt, some of our greatest leaders are not able to go back and teach in the communities where they're coming from. In addition to increasing teacher salaries, we push so many of the other choices from testing to curriculum to the federal level to the state level to give states, parishes, and families more say about how their children are educated. In addition to that, finally, we need to increase funding for electives and after-school programs to allow our young people to express their passions and their creativity.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. So education, I think everyone that's spoken is right. First, what we have to do is invest in those communities so that we don't have child poverty. So we have to make a significant investment in the lives and the families of those communities, really making a true reinvestment into poorer communities where we see the resources where schools have been defunded and resources have been pulled away. Making sure that those schools, regardless of the students, regardless of their zip code, can get a quality education. A true reinvestment in traditional public schools. We've seen this system be exacerbated by for-profit schools, by charter programs and things like that. We have to get back to square one and make a true reinvestment, especially in poor minority communities where we know that the schools have been defunded. And Mr. Winstrup was right, I agree. We definitely need to invest in after-school programs, making sure that these students have an outlet, even if that program is the arts or sports or whatever it may be, making sure that these students have an outlet and a place that they can go to express themselves artistically, athletically, or whatever it may be. But we can't stop there. We have to make sure that when students want to go to college or trade school, that they don't graduate burdened with debt. We have to eliminate the student debt, and we can do that by wiping out the federal debt for every college student and making sure that when they graduate, they don't graduate into the lower middle class, that they can make a living and become an asset to society, which is why they decided to go to school in the first place.
Thank you. Mr. Billiot?
Thank you. Education is the fundamental building blocks of every civilized nation. And, we must educate our children if we desire to strengthen our nation to its former glory. I am not a proponent of raising the minimum wage. However, I am a proponent of increasing the value of every individual and raising them up in the economic ladder. Raising the minimum doesn't solve the problem. It just moves it a little bit higher. But if we increase the value of our people through education, through opportunity, then we increase their self-worth, and it'll give them a little bit more excitement about what they're doing. Teachers should be well compensated in order to attract those that are most qualified. And I also believe that the education needs to be brought back to the state and not on the federal level, because each state, we all have cultural differences around the country, and we all learn differently. We need to empower the teachers and not make this cookie cutter education process, but let the teachers identify the strengths and weaknesses of the children, and to be able to embody them and empower them to reach their full potential. If we just have a checklist to go by, then we just follow this process that has been proven unsuccessful. If we give everybody a diploma to increase the graduation rate, we've done nothing, because the value of that diploma is worthless. We need to empower the authorities and the administrators to give them the tools they need to empower change in their school, and we have to empower the trade school program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we are currently in phase 3 during this pandemic. Are there any additional safety measures that you will put in place to prevent another large outbreak of COVID-19? Dr. Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza, please unmute your mic.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think the most important part is protecting your eyes. The droplets from COVID-19 are flying in the air, and they attach to anything that is wet, and your eyes are, I believe that 40% of the infections in COVID-19 is through the eyes. And the government hasn't narrowed that down yet. But, to me, that's something that I am promoting, asking everybody, the people that I know, the people I care about, asking them to wear eyewear, whether it's eyeglasses or goggles or shields. But I think that is something that I will implement, and I will make mask mandatory to everybody. I lived 9 years in Japan, and Japan has kept the death rate to less than 1,000 people, or less than 2,000 people over the same period of time. And in the United States, we're losing a person every 90 seconds. So I think that we need to make masks mandatory nationwide, and to wear glasses. And that way we can save the 100,000 people that's supposed to die within the next 60 days. So we need to be more proactive and decisive. And this is not a political statement. This is saving lives. Thanks.
Thank you. Attorney Myers Montgomery?
Yes, thank you. We should have been listening to science at the beginning. And one of the main issues is that we did not allow our health experts to take control of the crisis. So right now, it's about waiting for the vaccine. We can utilize masks, we can utilize face shields, which are all great preventative measures. But I think now is we're waiting for the vaccines to come out. The issue that I see is that we've seen a lot of protests regarding the lockdowns, regarding the mask requirements. And I think that it's in response to people are worried about how are they going to pay their bills. So if we have stimulus in place where people are not worried about, are not making a decision between their health and being able to make rent or pay their mortgages or pay their bills, I think that puts the people in a much better position. And instead of worrying about lockdowns and protests from lockdowns and things like that, by providing for what the true needs are of the people. They want to make sure that they're clothed. They want to make sure that they're sheltered. They want to make sure that they're eating. So us as the government being able to step in while we're waiting for this vaccine to be delivered, while we're waiting for the necessary measures to be put in place. Our president had a playbook for dealing with the crisis before. And unfortunately, we turned it into a political issue instead of a scientific and medical issue. So I think that by listening to the health experts, we're seeing that the death rate is anywhere between 2.5% to 5%, but we're not also dealing with the looking at the comorbidities. So it's a very complex issue. It's a very complex issue. But if we focus on the things that people are truly concerned about, that's making sure that they can pay their bills, making sure that they stay in their homes and paying their bills, I think that will allow us to alleviate this crisis.
Thank you, Attorney Miles Montgomery. Next, we have Mayor Perkins.
Yes, I say we got to listen to the healthcare experts. And I understand that you said that, what restrictions would you go, what we take in addition to it, but we haven't really listened as a nation, period. We need to be wearing masks outside, and we have to remain very, very cautious and diligent with this virus out there. The reason why I'm saying that, though, is because as mayor, I saw the devastation that this virus caused in my community. And the way that we combated that was with messaging, targeted messaging, and with resources. We made sure that we made testing available. And when we did that, we made the Washington Post, because we use technology in order to combat this virus. We use messaging, and we made the front page of the Washington Post, but we also made the New York Times list. We were number 6 in the country for slowest viral spread. But, we also have to talk about how the federal government can respond, not just how I'm responding as the mayor, but we got to talk about how the federal government can respond. And that's by providing a sufficient relief bill to the people of the United States. And not just the people, but they also have to look after small businesses and have to look after municipalities like Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and cities throughout Louisiana and throughout the country. If you invest in the people, you allow our citizens, our workforce, our families to remain strong throughout this pandemic. If you invest, you make sure that, we're stronger on the opposite side. When you invest in small businesses, you make sure that our economy is going to be stronger on the opposite side. Small businesses are the cornerstone of our economy. And when you invest in cities, you make sure that we keep providing basic services to citizens. And we have not seen that kind of consistent leadership out of Washington, D.C. since this pandemic started. That's the reason why I'm running for the United States Senate, to give the people of Louisiana someone in D.C. that's going to fight for them.
Thank you so much for your response. Next, we have Mr. Peter Winstrup.
Thank you. When we talk about our response to COVID-19, we need to make sure we're always talking about our response for whom. We saw our president get sick to COVID-19 and go to Walter Reed Hospital with great medical care and be fine. Meanwhile, my friend and assistant coach, Cornell Charles, passed away in April because not everyone has that care. I'm a huge basketball fan. We saw the NBA play for 3 months safely because they had testing, supported isolation. They knew what they were doing. We've seen private schools operate safely for their students. Meanwhile, my wife every day is wondering which of her students is going to drop out because virtual learning is not working for her. The response for whom? We need testing for on-site for anyone who makes below $15 an hour and for students and teachers. We need supported isolation so that if you get sick, you don't have to go home to your family. You're gonna have a hotel room to stay in. We need contact tracing. We need the same resources for our communities in Louisiana that are available to millionaires and billionaires everywhere. I also think that this is tough for our families and that we should consider a 14-day national attack to lock down, test 75 million people, come out on the other end in a better place.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Winstrup. Next, we'll have Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot that we can do to address this issue. First, we have to pass the HEROES Act. And the HEROES Act is an umbrella for a lot of the issue, a lot of the resolution, the solution that I think will bring some real solutions to the issue. First of all, we need to make sure that every single person in this country is covered under health care. We need to make sure that no person has to struggle to go and see a doctor to get tested. We need to do contact tracing and those sorts of things, because we know that the number of people that have died are disproportionately Black. The number of people that have gotten sick are disproportionately Black. So once we pass the HEROES Act, while we're waiting on a vaccine, we need to make sure that there's a stimulus. Of course, that's included in the HEROES Act. We need to make sure that every single person gets the stimulus. We need to reinstate the federal moratorium on evictions. We need to make sure that we reinstate the federal unemployment aid. We need to protect our frontline employees. We need to make sure that every single person has paid family leave. We need to make sure that there's support for small businesses so that they don't continue to go under. We know we've lost over 100,000 businesses, small businesses. We need to make sure that that bill includes support for state and local governments. This is going to take political will. This is going to take people that are not under the thumb of corporations to make sure that people continue to get sick. We need to make sure that people can have some legal support if they should be forced back to work, which we're seeing, and they should.
Thank you so much for your response, Mr. Pierce. Next, we'll have Mr. Billiot.
90 seconds to solve a pandemic. Thank you. The challenges that we have is lack of leadership all across the board. You know, the government's responsibility to a lot of this stuff. I am not a big government fan. I am not the government has to pay for everything fan. Because think about economics. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a small business owner. I deal with numbers all day long. And my small business suffered through the pandemic just like everybody else did. But the challenge that we have is, where does the money come from? You know, the government has $0. And so how do we talk about we don't want to raise taxes, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. Then how do we fund this money that we're spending? The solution to this is good information. And we need to be on the same page. Our leaders, we've had mixed messages through this whole pandemic. You've got one saying masks work, one says masks don't work. You got one says masks helps the other person, and you say masks helps you. If we have straight information, we have good leadership. The answer to this thing is to stop all economic activity. Don't throw money into it, but stop all debt recovery. Just like rent bypass. You know, if a person has a mortgage on a home, he has to pay it, and the person's not paying him rent, he's going to lose that home. We need to think past the first step of this stage and talk about the whole process. And so the only way to do it is an economic gridlock to stop it. But from a personal, we all have to take personal accountability for our actions, and we need to follow the guidelines of leaders that.
Thank you so much for your response, Mr. Billiot. Next, we'll have Mr. John.
Hey, thank you so much. So I have a couple points here. One, this whole corona farce, it's not about people dying or anything. This is about false positives and infection rates being high while morbidity is down. But piggybacking off that point, if you look at the CDC, which quietly updated their numbers, the morbidity rate from simply COVID alone was 2,100, very close to that. And they worded it very deceptively. And then now they're trying to retract that. I have screenshots. Can't make this stuff up, and the media is behind it. They want everyone living in fear. Also, Let's see, minimum wage. Okay, if you crank that up, every employer doesn't want to take that kind of hit. They're going to make every service or every product they offer cost more, and your dollar is going to go a lot, not as far at all. So, I mean, your 99-cent hamburger at McDonald's will now be $3. Shooting from the hip, that's not exact numbers, but it'll be something around that. Also, too, we can't live bailout to bailout. Talk about hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve loans the United States money at interest every year, and it's not federal. Look into that. I'm not making that up. And then, okay, vaccines have never cured. They simply prevent, and that's if you have the right one and not have an adverse reaction to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answers. Next, Kasey is up with the next question.
Less than 50% of Louisiana citizens can't afford quality health care. If elected, what will be done to ensure that the majority of citizens have access to health care? Attorney Montgomery.
Universal health care. Universal health care. If you notice that in the United States, we're one of the very few developed nations that do not have a single payer healthcare system. Making the United States government is the biggest consumer. And so as the biggest consumer, we should be able to negotiate with not just the insurance companies, but actually negotiate with the healthcare providers themselves to make sure that we have the healthcare that the people need. When we look at the Affordable Care Act, a lot of that was beneficial to the health insurance companies, not the actual healthcare providers and the people who needed the healthcare. I was a beneficiary of it. The funny thing is that when I first started law school, I was paying $200 a month just for healthcare. Once I utilized the healthcare navigator, I was paying $20 a month. So the thing is that much of the money was going to the health insurance companies instead of the actual healthcare providers. If we move to a single payer system, we're now able and give people the option of either having private insurance or utilizing insurance that's provided by the government, or not necessarily provided by the government, but subsidized by the government.
Thank you. Mayor Perkins.
Yeah, I gotta say, healthcare is another thing that's one of those investments into our people. You have strong people, you have strong families, you have a strong community. And I'd say the first thing that I do as United States Senator is make sure that we protect the Affordable Care Act. And right now, the Affordable Care Act is under assault. They've already removed the individual mandate. Now litigation is headed towards the Supreme Court that will allow insurance companies to bar people with pre-existing conditions. That'll mess up the pool of applicants, undermining the program. So we have to protect the Affordable Care Act. If the Affordable Care Act goes away, Medicaid expansion goes away, and 500,000 Louisianians are in jeopardy of losing their health care. Almost 1 million Louisianians with pre-existing conditions too might lose their health care. The second step, we have to expand the Affordable Care Act, and we have to make sure that it's affordable. We have to make sure that health care is affordable. And we can do that by voting to allow the federal government to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies. And that's the way that I'd approach healthcare first in the United States Senate.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
I agree. I think what we can do is first protect the Affordable Care Act, make sure that it is not repealed. Although that might be something very difficult to do, seeing that we just saw a Supreme Court justice forced through on us that has pretty much vowed to do just that. But in the meantime, what we can do is make sure that we reinstate the individual mandate, open up a public option for the ACA. But I think as a country with the highest GDP on the planet, we can take it a step further and offer universal health care to every single person in this country. No one in this country should die without health care or die because they cannot afford their prescription medication. So what we can do is provide universal health care, making sure that it covers pre-existing conditions, and also making sure that the government can negotiate with pharmaceutical industry for prescription drug prices, making sure that no one, regardless of their ability to pay, goes bankrupt trying to afford their prescription medications. So that's what I think the direction we should go as a country.
Thank you. Mr. Winstrup?
Thank you. And I'd like to talk about some real people in response to this question. This question is personal to me. My wife has type 1 diabetes. And so if Senator Cassidy got his way, our family might not have access to healthcare for her. And what's even worse is that he will continually get on TV and lie about that fact, lie about what was in the bill he wrote. We must protect people with pre-existing conditions, make sure they can get coverage. Let's talk about folks that I know who have had complications with pregnancy and early childhood. Louisiana has one of the worst outcome rates for especially women of color in pregnancy and shortly thereafter. We need to improve funding for things like nurse-family partnerships to make sure mothers and babies are safe throughout the process. We have kids at my school who are missing days of school to go to the doctor's office. We need to invest in school clinics so that our young people can get the health they need when they need it and get back to pursuing their dreams. We need to make sure that we increase Medicaid reimbursement rates so people in my community don't have to drive by 4 doctors on their way to find one who accepts their coverage. We need to make sure that everyone has access to healthcare, and we need to make sure that our small business owners can buy a public option so they have affordable care as they start their business. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Billiot?
You know, healthcare is a big issue, and it's always been a hot topic across the country, and it's something that can't easily be resolved. But there are some steps that I know that we can take to minimize the impact, and it would be a slow transition into it. I am not a proponent of a single payer system. We live in a capitalistic free enterprise society. When we inject socialized medicine into a capitalistic society, then it becomes a problem. So, you know, I've lived in social nations when I was in the military, and people in long lines waiting years for treatment. So if it's free, then what is the benefit if you can't get it? And so there are some issues, but you know, the government does have a responsibility in making sure that we regulate these companies that are making billions of dollars a year while we, the citizenry, are actually suffering. And so that needs to be regulated. I fully understand that. But if we increase the competition in a capitalistic society, prices go down. But we have to regulate them that they cannot reject you because you have a pre-existing. I am a heart patient. I've had open heart surgery. So I know the fact that I can't be covered if we lose this failure or this pre-existing condition situation. We have to make sure that those people can be covered. But to go back to government controlled, everything the government controls, they mess up. So we got to fix that. And we can regulate, but I don't think we should administrate.
Thank you. Mr. John?
Hey, yes, so I completely agree with everything Beryl Billiot said, and I will adapt all of that, and I will add 2 points. One, I will completely repeal this Obamacare, which is referred to as the Affordable Care Act. Also, 2, I would like to tame big pharma and move more towards natural medicine and things that are actually anecdotal instead of support things like chemotherapy that their patent hasn't ran out and actually causes more harm than good. The last thing you want to do is tear down your immune system whenever one is sick. You want to boost that up. So eating things like turmeric and taking lots of vitamin C and D and a healthy exercise regimen will definitely keep you fit and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza?
I would definitely do the Medicare for all. And I hear everybody talking about, some people say America is the richest country in the world, but we are actually working under deficit. We have a $4.5 trillion annual expense, but we only had $3.5 trillion in revenues. So we're working with $1 trillion of deficit, which all that goes to corporate subsidies. So we need to be able to pay for Medicare for all. We need to reinvest 10% of all the corporate subsidies and defense the wasteful funding. And we need to reinvest that in the Green New Deal, agrarian reform, create 25 million new smart farms, and new clean energy, solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower. And with that, we can create $1 trillion in revenue. So we need to reinvest some of the wasteful funding and subsidies and reinvest it in the production of 50 million new jobs with the Green New Deal. And that's the best way that we can do to not only erase the annual $1 trillion deficit, but we be able to produce $3.5 trillion, which eventually in 10 years will erase the $24 trillion deficit. So
Thank you.
Gentlemen, Baton Rouge Representative Ted James recently brought a resolution to Congress to create a study group to review law enforcement. If elected, is that a resolution that you will be in favor of? Why or why not? Please elaborate. Mayor Perkins?
Yes, I'd say yes, I would be in support of that because reforming a police department or reforming our law enforcement practices in the United States is actually improving law enforcement in the United States and making our officers safer. I've seen it firsthand in the city of Shreveport, where I've gone on patrol right alongside my police officers. As a matter of fact, right now we're pushing to pass legislation to even compensate them more. They are our heroes in the city, but even the police officers, as I've sit with them through hours and hours of listening sessions, they agree that they do need to reform some of their practices to have more trust from the community. Having more trust from the community at the end of the day makes them safer. So I'm in full support of Representative James and his proposal for a review of those practices, but also, like I said, very much support our first responders who I get to work alongside, have the honor of working alongside every single day in the city of Shreveport.
Thank you so much for your response. Mr. Pierce?
Well, absolutely. And that's why I support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It's a sweeping piece of legislation that's been passed by the House already, that's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk collecting dust. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act covers a lot of the issues that we've seen, particularly those faced by African Americans in this country. It covers carotid holes. It covers no-knock warrants. It covers repealing qualified immunity to put to hold police officers responsible and accountable the same as they would any other citizen. It holds police officers accountable to doing their job, protecting and serving, because we know that in some communities, police officers protect and serve, and in others, they police. We want to make sure that every single person in every community, regardless of where they are, get the same type of policing. We want to make sure that the funding goes where it should go to end the school to prison pipeline, to end over policing in our communities, and to actually provide resources in communities where it matters. For example, having social workers in communities, mental health resources in communities, making sure that the funding goes so that people don't end up in the justice system in the first place. But certainly the first thing we need to do when we on election day, or once we are installed, is to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and get some healing started in our communities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Winthrop?
Thank you. I was canvassing in my own neighborhood, knocking on doors, talking to real voters a couple weeks ago. And I ran across a woman who was agitated. She was holding a knife. She was in conflict with a gentleman. And she asked me, she said, "Sir, can I borrow your phone?" I said, "Of course." And she said, "Sir, can you dial 911?" I said, "Fine." And then as I'm dialing, she signals to me that she just wants me to fake the call. And then I give the phone to her. She pretends to talk to the cops because she doesn't trust in that moment for our public safety officers to resolve the crisis, to provide conflict mediation. And that's a problem. And I've read there's, Ted James, so many others, there's lots of really great proposals out there, lots of regulations we could add. But the fundamental problem with our public safety is that we pay our officers in promises instead of dollars. And so we have these thick rule books and these protections, And what we need to pay the average salary for a police officer in Louisiana is $42,000 a year. And those folks are not trained as mental health experts or as addiction experts or in conflict resolution. We need to empower law enforcement with professional wages up to $80,000. And in exchange, they should do what the rest of us do, is work at will. If you don't do your job, if you're disrespectful, you lose your job. It works for everybody else. It can work for public safety. And finally, we empower local governments to choose who's on those forces, from mental health workers to social workers.
Thank you, Mr. Winstrop. Next, we have Mr. Billiot.
I agree with a lot of being said is, we have police officers out there that are underpaid. We're not attracting the best people into our public service arena. Just like education, education and law enforcement are the two most important professionals in our communities. And we're getting second-rate citizens in a lot of these positions because they can't compete with the private sector. And I do see that in many locations. You got some police officers in small communities making $8 to $10 an hour, and they're putting their life on the line. So if they can turn their head and get an extra $500 just not to do something, the chance of corruption and problems are raised, and they're not held equally accountable either. We need to have a justice system that holds individuals accountable for their actions and have a true enforcement policy across the board, regardless of, what your race, what your social status, no matter what your background is, the law is the law. If it says you can't do X, then don't do X. If you do X, you get punished the same way, no matter who you are. And so there is definitely some issues that need to be addressed in the judicial system, and it starts out with our education and the poverty. So it's a systemic problem that we have to address. We can't just attack one area of our nation without addressing the other. If we can educate and empower our people, give them a living wage that increase their value, then it reduces the strain on the public service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billiot. Next is Mr. John.
Hey, yes, ma'am. Thank you so very much. One, who was Representative James and what did he propose? I have no idea. Second, if police officers are our heroes, why do they have to stand down to BLM and Antifa protests whenever they're burning and looting? Also, two, we need to look into who funds BLM and Antifa, which is George Soros. He should be kicked out of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John, for your response. Dr. Mendoza.
I believe that, of course, I support police reform, but the entire criminal justice system needs to be reformed. And we see the Supreme Court being manipulated by one person, and we have the entire Senate supporting that. And we cannot fix the little problems at home when we have major problems in DC, from the Supreme Court to all the way down. So we need to shake up everything, fire everybody in Washington, and especially the president, so we can fix the problem. Most cops don't make enough money. Many of them work 2 jobs, so they have to find a way to figure out how to survive. So we pay them better, they will do a better job. But they need racial and ethnic training and the resources, more resources, body cameras and better equipment. And even social workers should not be in the community, should be with the cops. They need to have more training so they can do better. Like, the movie with in the.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Mendoza. Next, we have Attorney Myers Montgomery.
Thank you. I would support Ted James's resolution. In fact, back in 2015, I proposed legislation dealing with law enforcement reform. The problem is that we make every problem a law enforcement problem. We make mental health a law enforcement problem. We make social work a law enforcement problem, and then expect for law enforcement to handle those problems when they're not trained to do that. On top of that, we give police officers a level of immunity to handle all those problems when they really shouldn't be handling all those problems. They should be handling law enforcement problems. In addition, particularly in Shreveport in 2019, Anthony Childs was murdered, was shot in the back, and they ruled it a suicide. Then here in 2020, Tommy McLaughlin Jr. and Wavy Austin were killed. And so we're seeing that law enforcement needs to be reined in, and we need an entire overhaul of the entire criminal justice system. You can't. It's difficult to get rid of bad officers because of the law enforcement Bill of Rights here in Louisiana. That you go in there, and if one thing happens, one thing is wrong with how things are handled when they're trying to get rid of the officer, then the officer is able to get their job back through the Civil Service Board. So we need an entire overhaul. And when we have bad officers, like what's been going on in Shreveport, there's been a $25 million settlement demand.
Thank you for your responses. Next is Kasey.
Okay. Yes, Louisiana has experienced many devastating natural disasters. What would you do to ensure citizens are adequately prepared for a disaster? And how will you aid citizens in repairing the damage? What resources will be provided to citizens to assist them during natural disasters? Mr. Pierce.
Well, we have to make sure that the funding is there. We need to make sure that FEMA is fully funded. We have to make sure that state and local governments are prepared, that they are also funded, but that people are aware of where the resources are to help them to recover. Of course, we just saw Hurricane Laura, Hurricane Delta. We saw a lot of things happen as a result of that. People kicked out of hotels before their homes were repaired. We saw people going back without electricity. We have to make sure that those things don't happen, and that the programs that are on the ground that we pay our taxes to support people in these circumstances are well funded and have the resources to get those dollars out on the ground to the people where they are needed. Certainly, we need a backup plan. We have to have a sort of a federal type of rainy day policy. We see in the amendments that the state was trying to set something up very similar, but we need something on the federal level that does the same thing to make sure that when these things occur, that people have the resources that they need, and they're not put in a situation where their lives are in danger. They don't have clean drinking water. They don't have electricity. They don't have adequate shelter. We need to make sure that we're funding that on the state and local level. And this is why state and local funding is extremely important. And not only that, but the communication between the federal government and state and local entities, state and local governments is extremely important. So we have to have that. We need to make sure that.
Thank you. Mr. Winstrup.
Thank you. And again, I actually apologize for my lighting, and I'm thankful to my host, Mr. John Hankins. Our house is still without power from Hurricane Zeta. And we're all fine, but the damage that I see is about 2 or 3 blocks away, and there's a low-income apartment complex that has totally collapsed. So I think that goes back to the root that a $15 minimum wage, which I would believe that every Democratic candidate would support, but unfortunately not all do. A $15 minimum wage allows folks to invest in housing, to make choices about housing and storm preparation so that they have a safe place and that they have safe supplies. And then, of course, we need FEMA to do a better job. Bill Cassidy sat by while the administration stole money from FEMA for pet projects. We have to stop that. We need to make sure that FEMA is fully funded and prepared to support folks in a time of crisis.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Billiot.
Funding FEMA and the other federal programs is critical, and to make sure the money goes to where it has to. But we also need to make smarter choices too on the state level and working with state government. We have a tendency as a species, a human race, to change Mother Nature. We build levees, we create dams, we do things that actually create bigger challenges for us down the road. Our marshland in Louisiana is deteriorating, and the barrier islands are gone, exposing all the lower lying areas. And it's because of decisions that we make. We need leadership that's going to talk to the experts to identify the long-term effects of the choices that we make. It's highly important that we think long-term and not short-term when we're looking at solutions. But funding and to give those solutions to the people that are experiencing damage, we need to hold people accountable who are frauding the government. They're abusing the system. And I'm sure I know personally people that had no damage and claimed with FEMA and got new roofs on their homes and things. And there are things that are happening. We need to uphold we need to raise the integrity of people. We as a nation need to come together and work together and not focus on what separates us, but focus on what unites us. And let's pull together to solve the problems that we have. We can fund these federal programs, we can help each other, but it takes a community to raise children and to raise each other and to support each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John?
Yes, thank you so very much. Yeah, one, I would raise awareness to weather modification by the government. There's tons of projects they do to aerosoliate in the stratosphere. Also, two, I would also appropriate adequate funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza?
I would pre-deploy more FEMA resources to the area where the disaster is supposed to occur, and make sure there's a federal and state and city coordination, because we have a good system here in Louisiana with the governor and city mayors, but the federal government is absent most of the times. And so we need to have better coordination with the federal government as far as a evacuation program and make available hotel rooms to the people that are evacuating. And for the people that after the storm, post-storm disaster, we need to implement the road home program for every disaster, for every area. So if you have a damage in your house, you can get a non-refundable grant for up to $150,000, so that you can rebuild. But we would make sure that you rebuild better with a better construction. I'm trying to implement a program where people can use hempcrete instead of the regular 2x4, so they can have a stronger house. They can protect them for a category 5. And
thank you. Mr. Montgomery?
Thank you. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we need to invest heavily in our infrastructure, because we know that we're going to have hurricanes. We know that we're going to have floods. So we need to update, we need to have an updated code that allows us to prepare for that. I was down in Lake Charles 10 days before Laura. I was there 10 days after Laura. I was there 10 days after Delta hit, providing resources, providing water, providing bleach, providing cleaning materials. So we need to make sure that we have better preparedness, disaster preparedness, so that when these disasters hit, it's not hitting us in such a heavy manner. If we have more robust infrastructure that's dedicated for flood and for floods and for hurricanes, we can help prevent that. If we already have pre-deployed resources by FEMA in terms of modular housing, in terms of modular power sources, and in terms of modular cleaning facilities, we can help alleviate some of the costs. When you go down to Lake Charles and Lafayette, you see the destruction. you see that it didn't matter whether or not you were Democrat, Republican, rich or poor, it hit you. But what you did see a difference was in the recovery efforts. And the recovery has not been spread around fairly amongst the people. So if we focus more on preparation and disaster preparedness, we'll be in a much better position to deal with these disasters, and they won't be as costly and deadly as we've seen.
Thank you. Mayor Perkins?
Yes, I got to tell you, as the mayor of Shreveport, who experienced its first hurricane in recorded history, I've faced climate change head on as a leader, as a candidate and traveling the state and going down to Lake Charles myself and seeing that devastation and walking through minority neighborhoods where I met citizens that said that they hadn't seen any state officials or any, leadership out of Washington, D.C. Like, I've seen this up close and personal. We know that we are losing, aside from the hurricanes, we know that we're losing about a football field's worth of land every hour here in Louisiana. But we have to get at the underlying problem here. This is another one of those things where we have to listen to science. We have to listen to the experts, and climate change is real. And that's exactly what we're experiencing. I stand beside the governor in a commitment to be carbon neutral here in Louisiana by 2050. We have to start transitioning to that and do our part.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, Louisiana has 4 major HBCUs, and funding has been decreased in the past years. How do you plan to address the financial disparities that HBCUs face in Louisiana if elected? Mr. Winstrup.
Well, we should start by getting Southern University Law Center its own law library, would be a good start. And we must make sure that we keep our HBCUs, like Southern, independent so that they have diverse voices and they contribute to our state's future and to our state's vision. And as somebody who's focused on funding education at all levels, I will work with the Board of Education. I will work with local leaders to make sure that every university, including our HBCUs, has the resources they need to provide the best education possible.
Thank you, Mr. Winstrup. Next, Mr. Billiot.
As we were talking about before, education being the fundamental building blocks and understanding the difference and the various methods of education that we all go through, the economical, the social, the differences in us, we have to have these varying educational institutions because we need to be comfortable where we're being educated. We need to be in an environment in which we can understand. So funding educational facilities, whether HBCUs or their standard, state-run facilities or whatever, education is important. And so as long as we're getting the value out of it and the educational standard is where it needs to be, then we need to make sure that that continues on a proper path. The challenges that I see is we have some things that are earmarked for funds that are not performing at the level in which they should. And so the education level that's coming out of some of the different locations may not be up to a particular standard. And so then is that revenue wasted? Or where is the problem? Identifying the root cause, just like we're doing with the environment, with all the identifying the root cause of challenges that we face. When they talk about cutting funding, what is the reason? And so we need to look as leaders to do the research and find the resources.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Billiot. Next, we have Mr. John.
Hey, thank you so much. I don't know what HBCU means. I wanted to circle back and hit some other points from earlier. One, we are carbon-based life forms, and climate change / global warming, which they can't figure out a name for, is another UN hoax, and it's an attack on carbon. And forgive me for not knowing what HBCU is. I was not prepared for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Mr. John. Next, we have Dr. Mendoza.
I believe the most important investment that we can do as a nation is to invest in education, and that is from Head Start to colleges and universities and trade schools. And but to me, a nation that is broke, working with a $1 trillion deficit, cannot invest in education. And that's why I'm proposing to reinvest the corporate subsidies, which can also be called corporate welfare. Many people are concerned that a poor person receives $1,000 a month in welfare check to survive, but we have corporations that are receiving $1 trillion every year. So we need to correct that. We need to stop all the subsidies, and we need to reinvest them in the creation of jobs. But one of the most important areas for reinvestment is education. So that's where I would increase the reinvestment of the subsidies and the war profiteering funding from the Department of Defense. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendoza. Next, we'll have Attorney Myers Montgomery.
Thank you. As the only graduate of an HBCU, a historically Black college university, two-time graduate of Southern University, it's very important that we fund our HBCUs. It's very important that we fund our HBCUs because they also provide a culturally relevant education. So with Southern University Law Center, Southern University, Grambling State University, Dillard University, Xavier University, particularly here in Louisiana, it's very important that we fund these universities, because what we're seeing is a shift in state support for these universities. We're not seeing a lot of support for the universities, being that these provide an affordable alternative to some of the other schools. It's extremely important that we fund our HBCUs, and I make sure that HBCUs get their funding. In addition, Southern University Law Center just enjoyed its first 100% bar passage rate for first-time bar takers. I'm the only attorney that's here from Southern University Law Center, and I'm a proud product of HBCUs and Southern University. So I'm living proof of what HBCUs can put out, and the importance of HBCUs in our nation, and not only just in Louisiana.
Thank you so much, Attorney Myers Montgomery. Next, we'll have Mayor Perkins.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we need to make sure that funding is commensurate between historically Black colleges and universities and all other universities. And from the federal level, if states can't afford that, or if states are showing favoritism, we need to make sure that we're looking out to make sure that that's even. We know that in our country that some people feel more comfortable going to a historically Black college and a university. We also know that at some of the other universities, that they have other means of revenue and other financial support systems that some of our HBCUs don't have. They have bigger, sporting programs, they have bigger donors and the like. So we have to make sure that we are supporting our historically Black colleges and universities. And I'll say one of the proudest things that I've done as mayor is being Shreveport being the home of the Bayou Classic this year, where we host two of the most well-known historically Black colleges and universities in the country for the Bayou Classic. So we have to make sure that we keep these institutions strong, so that my mentors, peers, friends, colleagues that all attended it, we can bring up another generation of strong leaders just like them.
Thank you for your answer, Mayor Perkins. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Mr. John, we would like to extend a second chance for you, since you did not understand what HBCU stands for.
Hey, I do sincerely appreciate that, and forgive me for my ignorance. I don't mean to gum up the system or waste any time. I think that's a great thing. You're asking what I would do to help raise funds for that, or what was the question about HBCUs?
So funding has been decreased in the past years.
Oh, it's
What
been
do you
decreased?
plan to address for the financial disparities that HBCUs face in Louisiana?
Oh no, I definitely like to appropriate funds. I applied to Southern. I think I'm still in limbo to see if I can go there and finish my law degree. Yeah, I'm all about that. HBCUs are very important, and I appreciate y'all letting me know what that meant. Thank you.
Next. Next, Mr. Pierce.
Okay, so what we have to do for sure is make sure that, and everyone is just about everyone has covered this is funding, but how do we do that? We make sure that we have adequate Pell Grant funding. About 30% of the people who receive Pell Grants are African Americans. And of those African Americans, the vast majority of them also took out student loans, which means that the budget for Pell Grants is not sufficient to cover the need. So we have to make sure that on a federal level, we make an investment in Pell Grants, because we know those Pell Grants will help African Americans to get the education they need. And they're going to make that investment most predominantly in HBCUs. So we have to make the investment that way, making HBCU funding permanent, so that we don't have to keep coming back and having this conversation perpetually. Making a true investment in HBCUs as a option for students across the country to be able to attend the colleges and take advantage of the programs that are offered in these particular universities that have been a great benefit. I've lived in Baton Rouge my entire life, and I know Southern for all my life has been known for their law program. They've been known for their nursing program, engineering programs. So making sure that we make that investment, but also call for alumni and people that have benefited from their education at these prestigious colleges to also reinvest in their universities and make a commitment to giving those dollars back in whatever way they see fit to make sure that other students will be able to.
Thank you so much for your response, Mr. Pierce. Next, we'll have Kasey with the next question.
Yes, so now candidates, we will ask you to close for 2 minutes. Mayor Perkins.
Thank you so much. And once again, just thank the Southern University Law Center for hosting this forum tonight. You all have been producing leaders in this state for such a long time, and we enjoy them in Shreveport, Louisiana. You not only make Shreveport stronger, but you make the state stronger. I also want to thank my colleagues on this call tonight for them providing insightful answers as well. But I'll say this, Louisiana right now is just like a lot of things within this country, and we have leadership in Washington, D.C. that is putting us on the wrong path. We have leadership in Washington, D.C. that's fighting to overturn the Affordable Care Act that hundreds of thousands of Louisianans depend on. Hundreds of thousands, nearly 1 million of us, like I said, have pre-existing conditions spanning from asthma to cancer that's in remission. We need a fighter in Washington, D.C. that's going to look after our interests. We need a fighter in D.C. that's going to make sure that when a crisis arises like COVID, that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and make sure they're looking after the individual. They're looking after the families. They're looking after working class people. We need somebody in Washington, D.C. that understands all of Louisiana and not just going to go to Washington, D.C. and cozy up to corporations and donors and turn their back on Louisianans. Maya Angelou has a famous quote where she says, if somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. We have to believe who Cassidy is right now in Louisiana. We got to choose stronger leadership that's going to put us on a path to be stronger in the future. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you to the Southern University Law Center for putting on this forum. We've started this campaign years ago, traveling across the state, talking to voters about the issues that affect them. And that's what we're going to bring to Washington, a voice for the unheard, because I don't believe that the people of this state are voiceless. They're unheard. Most of the people we talked to have said that they haven't seen a government that's speaking for them, that speaks to their needs, that speaks to the needs of the middle class and the working poor, that speaks to the needs of minorities and people in other marginalized communities. And that's what we're going to bring. We're going to fight for universal health care. We're going to fight for basic human rights, raising the minimum wage, affordable housing. We're going to fight for environmental justice for places that have not seen that. We're going to fight to get corporate control out of our politics. These things are extremely important, especially to the people of Louisiana who have gone without. Especially there's so many families that are suffering right now as a result of COVID-19. Over 400,000 people are unemployed as we speak. Several facing evictions and moratoriums. Evictions without moratoriums. So many lack the unemployment aid they need to make ends meet. People right now are deciding whether or not they're going to pay for a hospital bill or put food on their table. This cannot continue. We need a voice in Washington that understands the needs of everyday working class people, and that's what we're going to go to Washington, D.C. to do. My name is Antoine Pierce. I'm number 12 on your ballot, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Winstrup.
Thank you, and thank you again to the Southern University Law Center for hosting an excellent event tonight. Too often, we send our politicians to Washington and they take that power with us. The beginning of this, I talked about the difference between serving and empowering. We have folks like Bill Cassidy who take our power, our votes, the power we give them by marching to the polls, and they take that Washington. And then they go to their social clubs in New York. They take that money from big pharmaceuticals, like Bill Cassidy has done and forgotten the people of Louisiana. We need leaders who empower the people, who bring the power from Washington to our communities, who empower workers with a $15 minimum wage to make decisions upon their own lives, to empower women and people of color with wage transparency so they can fight for what they are worth, be that equal or more than their peers. We need to empower families and children with excellent schools so they can chase their dreams. The antidote to the politics, the fighting, what we see in Washington is not escalation. It's not more Washington. It's bringing the power to the people, to the communities. That's resources, that's decision-making. For 10 years in the classroom, I empowered my students to find solutions. I gave them the tools. I trusted them to work and to be agents of their own change. That's what it needs to look like. I'm Peter Winstrup. I'm asking on November 3rd for your prayers, your support, and your vote for United States Senate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Billiot.
As I stated earlier, in light of all that's happening in our country right now, it's more important now than at any other time in our life to be involved in our political races. But it's time we put our political party affiliation aside and do what's best for America. It is being proven every day that the bipartisan system that made our country great is the same system that's tearing it apart. The initial intention was to bring conflicting ideas and perspectives to the table and find a mutually beneficial solution through constructive deliberation and compromise. Our leaders today are no longer working in the spirit of compromise. They're working in total competition, where only one party can win, leaving the American people to flounder in the aftermath of their inadequacy and their inability to lead. You know, it is upsetting when members of Congress hope for and plot to ensure failure of leadership. When this happens, it's evident that we're electing the wrong people. This November, forget the parties. Vote for Americans who will work for the betterment of our nation and the success of all its citizens. Vote for the candidate that best represents the values that you hold dear, not the one that the media says is likely to win. Take time to learn about the candidates and form your own opinion. Don't follow party lines blindly because you just might be led to the slaughter. Don't ever forget that freedom is always one generation away from extinction. So I challenge all of you to get involved, to support true American statesmen this election cycle. Let's get back to the basics and keep America free. It's not time to do something different. It's time to do something better. My name is Beryl Billiot. I'm number 1 on the ballot, hopefully number 1 in your heart, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John?
Hey, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. So I'll make this nice and quick. So I'm anti-mandatory mask and vaccine. I'm here to prevent a cashless society. I want to eliminate human trafficking in the dark web. I am pro-Trump, pro-gun. I am pro-life and pro-constitution. Xan John, number 6 on the ballot. I am the antidote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza?
I know that everybody is concerned about if they're gonna get infected with COVID-19, if they're gonna lose the job, if they're gonna lose the home. Everybody's concerned about food security. Most Americans are going to food banks. And everything has to do with Senator Cassidy's negligence with the COVID-19 response. He let 5,800 Louisiana citizens die for not standing up to President Trump. He's a doctor, he knows science, but he has been a coward. It hasn't fought for his citizens. He is not your friend. So please consider voting for Dr. Vinny Mendoza, vinnymendoza.com, number 8, and I will fight for you. I'm not going to let more people die. I'm going to be forceful, but I'm going with a 5-point action plan to create $3.53 trillion in revenue with the Green New Deal agrarian reform, with tax reform, with immigration reform and criminal justice reform. And most important of all, Medicare for all. So please consider voting number 8, Dr. Vinny Mendoza. Thank you and God bless Louisiana, and thank you for this putting this forum together. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Myers Montgomery.
Thank you to my alma mater, Southern University and Southern University Law Center for putting on this great forum. It's time to do what's best for Louisiana. That's making sure that our businesses are taken care of, that our students are taken care of, that our senior citizens are taken care of, and making sure that we utilize technology to help us make the right decisions. Our current senator, Senator Cassidy, has been a coward, has not stood up, has violated his Hippocratic oath. And he told us that he would do no harm. He would support legislation that did no harm. And look at all the millions of people who have been harmed by his failure to act. It's time that you elect someone that's going to fight for you, a proven fighter. I've fought in the courtroom for our children. I fought in the classroom for our children. I supported our war fighters as a weapons systems engineer for the United States Navy. And I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to fight for the people of Louisiana. You need someone that's not going to go to Washington and join a club. You need someone that's going to go to Washington and come back to Louisiana with real results and with real resources and with real dollars. My name is Jamar Montgomery. I'm running for United States Senate. I'm engine number 9. I'm number 9 on your ballot, and I hope on November 3rd that I have your vote. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for your closing statements.
Okay, everyone, I would like to thank all of our candidates for such an amazing forum this evening, for providing informative remarks, not only for our student body and our campus community, but for our constituents within the state of Louisiana as a whole. Again, continue to move forward and advocate and champion for our students, institutions, and residents of Louisiana. And now I will turn it over to Mr. Bakari.
Thank you, Chandler. It has been a great evening to hear from some of the candidates that are running for the Louisiana Senator position today. I would also like to mention 3 candidates that did not show up due to Hurricane Zeta. There's Mr. John Paul Boudreaux, Attorney Derek Edwards, Dr. Aaron Siegler, for those that were unable to attend today's event. But most importantly, we heard from these great candidates and what they had to do, what they had to say on the things that they would do for this state if elected. Now it's our time and our duty to go out and vote on November 3rd. Be the person that you want to see by voting first. I would like to thank Southern University Law Center as well as Southern University for helping us collaborate and hold this event for not only the students, but the community at large. May you all have a great day, and God bless America. Thank you.